Hey, family, it's your sister Jocelyn here, and welcome to another episode of Faith on the Journey. If this is your first time tuning in, we welcome you. We're so glad that you are here and want you to know that we're here to stand by your side as you're going through the difficult times in life. We have a team of Christian counselors who are prepared to serve you, and we also offer trauma healing groups throughout the year. You can learn about these services and so much more by visiting our website at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. Now, today's episode is actually very near and dear to my heart. Some of you might not know this, but I actually lost my father earlier this year in the spring. And my father had Alzheimer's. And describe it to people as losing my father twice because I watched his decline over the course of many years. And there was just so much grief associated with that loss. And so I wanted to talk about the grief that we feel when we know that our loved one as time is limited. And I also want to talk about some of the struggles that caregivers will have who are caring for those who might have Alzheimer's or a similar disease. And so I have a wonderful guest who I had the pleasure of recently meeting and share my story with. And she encouraged me so much that I wanted to bring her on as a guest for you all to hear from her. Dr. Valencia Montgomery is currently a neuropsychologist at Riverview Health Physicians Neuropsychology in Noblesville, Indiana. But she's a Chicago native, earning her doctorate degree in clinical psychology from Roosevelt University. Dr. Montgomery is passionate about helping people to understand the course, diagnosis, and treatment for Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. She believes it's important for the community to be aware and involved in this process, and she's here to share some valuable tools and resources with you today. So excited to have her here with us. We welcome you, Dr. Montgomery.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today.
Thank
Whew.
you. Thank you. Thank you for accepting the invitation. I know you have quite a busy schedule doing this important work. And so glad to have you here. And I want to start off our conversation by talking about the grief that I was describing, that I was going through actually, when you realize that your loved one has a diagnosis and
Mhm.
you start witnessing a decline, a change in them. So, can you talk about that grief that's experienced when that happens?
Yeah, I'm sure. So, I've experienced this with families from the beginning stages where, especially people think it's just normal aging. And so they go through that process of denial. This is probably not anything serious. This is normal aging. This is something that all adults go through. So there's the process of denial that happens a lot in the grief process overall. And then there's the adjustment to having the person physically present, but cognitively, they're no longer the same person. So, especially when it's a parent, because we always look to our parents as like our rock, like that stability in our life. And as we see them slowly slipping away, you have all kinds of emotions. Everyone processes it differently. Sometimes people become angry. They're there and they take that anger sometimes out on that loved one, and that happens in a variety of ways. Sometimes it's, why can't they just remember? I've told them a million times. Even though logically you understand that this person's brain no longer functions in a way that allows them to remember things as they used to, that need for the parent to still be that parent you knew or that loved one you knew can combat the actual logical processes that we usually have. And so that grief, it extends beyond just the knowledge that that person you're losing them permanently at some point, but it's that long process. And it's almost like, I think of the long kiss goodnight. It's like a very extended process where after so long, they don't even realize what they don't remember or what's going on. And so they're not even really truly on the journey with you. It's you experiencing every loss, every time they lose a new memory or forget a new name of a close family member or forget how to brush their teeth or just the everyday activities. So it's literally us watching a reversal of what you've experienced. When you think about your children and how they learn things step by step, is actually watching kind of a reversal of that.
Wow. And that's really what it is. And with the grief that someone's experiencing, what can you offer them in terms to help them process their grief? What are some things that they can do?
Yeah, so one of the things that I love to encourage families to do is in the earlier stages, create time and space for your parent or your loved one to just be that person. Find out more about them. So many times with our parents, we only think of them in the context of what it means for them to be our parent. We never learn about what they dreamt about when they were younger. We don't learn necessarily about all the music they listened to or the dances they listened to. Research has shown over and over again that music is one of the last things we lose memory of. And one of the ways to extend that relationship is by listening to the music and learning of the music that your loved one danced to or their favorite music was, because as the stages progress, that's still going to be a way for you to connect. So that's kind of one way to process it. The other way is to ask questions uh, about how you were. How did your parents experience you? How did your loved one experience you growing up? Um, it's to kind of find out what their hobbies were, or learn new things with them. At the beginning stages, it's still okay to learn new things and trial and error. Um, you can process things along the way as you go step by step. Understanding and learning as much as you can about whatever dementia diagnosis that they have. So, whether that's an Alzheimer's disease or a frontal temporal dementia, understanding the process and the steps to that and the kinds of things to expect along the way can go a long way in keeping you from being upset and surprised. Nothing's going to change the fact that you see the progression, but sometimes understanding how things work, understanding the disorder, takes away that alarming change every time something happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that surprise element that you're mentioning, sometimes it could be overwhelming. I remember there was a period of time where I hadn't talked to my dad in a while. I would say I wish I had checked in on him more frequently, but I think I also was dealing with the denial piece too, and so sometimes separating to act like it's not really happening could be
Mhm.
a defense mechanism. And so I remember talking to him for the first time after a couple weeks, and he was so confused. And
Mhm.
it was the first time that he was confused to the point where it sounded like it was almost like he was drunk. And I knew he
Mhm.
wasn't, but it wrecked me. And that
Mhm.
surprise element, as you describe, it was like this intense grief. And I didn't really understand that it was grief because my dad is still living. I'm talking to him
Mhm.
on the phone. But it's like just this constant state, as you described earlier, of loss. And I feel like it's important for us to be able to express and vocalize the pain that we're feeling as our loved ones are going through this.
Yep. I think one of the more important things is for you to gather your close people, your support system, and let it be okay for them to ask questions about any of the processes. How are you doing with this, or what is going on now? And having it be an open conversation. For so long, the idea of dementia in our community and other communities was like this thing that you kept silent, you didn't really talk about. And I think that sharing your journey can help so many other people, and you may not want to think of, well, I don't want this to be a lesson in helping other people, but it can also help you. I think you will have a place to say, oh, this was a rough day. These are the things that happen. And whether they have, and not expecting them to have an answer for it, right? So suspending that expectation to get an answer, but having a place to put some of that angst, because you'll feel angst at days when you're like, oh my God, this is the 150th time that I've told you that same answer. Uh, and sometimes, you'll have those joyous moments where you're learning something new. And what I always think about is the joy of learning and finding out and being curious about who my loved one was. In my case with my parents, I had long, long stories, and I found that my dad always wanted to be a farmer with longhorn cows. And I was like, what? How'd you end up in Chicago? But I never ever knew that about my dad. So some things you find out is just striking and it's funny because you never imagine, but then you start to see them also in a different light. Um, while they still have memories of the more recent things, sometimes you can create a memory book and you can use that for the times and go through it and even when they don't remember, you can remember stories that they've told you about those things, and sometimes that's a way of healing. Writing letters, so writing how you feel. Sometimes when we're going through these difficult losses, when we know that we're losing someone that we love so much and we're taking care of them, we can become angry because anger is so much easier than the pain and the emotion that you feel, right? And so we can express anger at them even though we're not really angry. The feelings that we feel are deeper. Well, I did that with my dad. And one day my dad said, it seems like every time you come, you're so angry. And I looked at him and I burst into tears and I said, it's because I don't want to break down every time I see you. And I just want to get everything right for you and just want to be there for you. And when he understood why, and when I understood that he saw this, I totally shifted. And it was my intention to just be okay. This is happening. And when you get to that acceptance point, which is a part of that grief process, it's going to be so much easier for you to understand that this is what you have. And however you spend that time, you will still have those memories. Why is it so? Ask yourself, why is it so important for them to remember everything? Because you will still have the memories. If they don't remember it, it's okay. It shouldn't be a, oh, I can't believe you don't remember this kind of feeling. It should be, I have this memory because I gave this time and I created this environment for it to exist. And it did exist. And I acknowledge that it existed. And I felt good. And I gave them that moment where they enjoyed it too. Sometimes we think if we can't remember, that means that we don't have enjoyment of it, but they can still enjoy things, right? Even though they can't always remember the activities in the moment, which is where we should all be living in the moment. The joy is there, the happiness is there.
Oh, yes, amen. You're ministering to me right now, and I can say this from lived experience. I remember when my dad was in the hospital, for we didn't know at the time it was part of his last days, and,
Mm,
he wasn't really able to talk. We were trying to get him to, watch some TV, watch some home videos on our phone. We were trying to figure out everything to kinda engage him, but we turned on one of his favorite songs, Family Reunion by the OJs. He used to just play that song, blast it in the basement when I was a kid and just loved that song, and so we was like, "Okay, let's play this." And he started singing, and
mhm,
it was like the nurses in the hospital were looking like, "Oh, that's so great. He just loves this song."
mhm,
And even though it was off key, it was the best. It was the best
mhm.
moment in the
Yep.
hospital. It was special, and part of me wishes that I recorded it, but something stopped me and said, "Jocelyn, you're never gonna forget this moment.
Mhm.
This memory is so precious to you." And I
Yep.
think even in their latter days, you can continue to make those moments
Yep.
special while they're here.
Yeah, and I join in, sing a little yourself, be off key,
Yes.
make it a
Yes.
duet, and because music really is, it's the thing for whatever reason our brain connects. And let me tell you that generally after they have gotten that connection to work, you can ask them questions and they can answer them. So there's
Mm.
a documentary called Alive Inside, and it's all about how music has brought individuals with more moderate to severe dementia, Alzheimer's disease, how music allows their brain activity. It stimulates it in such a way that they can listen to the music, sing along with it, they're jamming to the music, and then when the headphones are taken off, the interview can now engage them in questions and conversation about their lives. And so they're still in there. It's just that if you're a cognitive neuropsychologist, neuroscientist, one of the theories is that the information is still there. It's just the connections to it have depleted or they're no longer there. So the connections are not being made anymore to get to the information, but it's there. And sometimes music allows the access from a different way. Think about circuitry, it allows that access that way. So, yeah, put on the music, have a dance party if they're still able to get up. I mean, because those are the things you're going to remember from that moment, that you just stop worrying, stop being concerned with when tomorrow is going to bring, what it's going to bring, and live in that moment with that loved one and enjoy it. Because when you look back, those are the things that are going to make you smile. Those are the things that are going to be like, you don't want all your members to be, oh, they were so in the last days, they just sat around, because you didn't do anything to try to promote, that ability. And you're putting on that music and him singing and stuff, that's part of it. You're going to always have that memory of how he experienced life, even though he was at the end stage of a terrible disease, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is. And I think for just when you describe it as being a terrible disease, it's terrible for us, but how terrible it is for the person who's experiencing it, right? And I think about my
Yeah.
father, who was such a alpha male, so independent, so, go getterish. This is where I get it from, right?
Yeah.
And for him to have those small things taken away, to realize he's not as sharp as he used to be, to not being able to do some of the things that he felt made him who he was, to having the car keys taken away and resisting it, fighting it tooth and nail, getting angry about it, all
Mhm.
these things. We have to understand that if it's hard for us, it is hard for them.
It's hard for them when they have awareness. And that is usually the beginning stages. So they go through the stage where people start to notice changes, and they're like, something wrong, but I don't want anybody to know. Maybe it's okay. And but they're aware, and then they go through a stage right after that where they think nothing's wrong. I can do all these things, I can drive, I can remember, I don't know what you're talking about. And then they move out of that stage to where they just don't anymore. And so it's during those initial stages that I think, because there's still an awareness of losing themselves, that is the hardest part. But I like to think, and I can't really tell you what the research on it, I'm not really sure how research could be done on this, but I like to think that it becomes um, a new life in some ways for them once they get past that point, because now they don't have a knowledge of all the things that they knew or didn't know, or all the experiences that they had that they've forgotten. It's just a new day to them. And so sometimes I try to look at it like, okay, so if this person is experiencing life in a new way every day, how can we make that special? How can we make it, be something where they still feel useful? Or, usually people only, it only becomes a problem. What they remember is how they feel with a person. So, say I'm a doctor and I come in the room and I'm grumpy and I'm not so nice, and this patient doesn't have memory of new things or who I am, but when I walk in the room, they have a reaction to me that's negative. They understand that emotion, right? And so you don't want to cause them to have that with you because you're always grumpy or you're always this, or they feel like something's not quite right. They don't know why they feel uncomfortable with you in the room, but they still have that sense, that still carries over. And that's why it's important to stay encouraged and to stay, I'm not going to say don't have those sad moments, but share those sad moments with them. It's okay to be not okay in their presence, and be sad about it and express it. I think the more that we try to tamp that down and sit on it and squash those emotional sharings, the harder it makes for both people. Um, and so I think it's important to do shared grief, the shared grief process.
That's
Yeah.
very important, and I'm glad that you shared that. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about your story before we transition into some
Yeah.
how-tos for caregivers, because you served as a caregiver for both of your parents, correct?
I did. My mother, I was in my early 30s, and my mom got the flu one summer, and it turned into an autoimmune disease in her body, and it began to attack her body. She had diabetes. And somehow she her cognition just went. It was pretty quick. What they called it was organic brain syndrome. My mom moved in with me. I was her caregiver 100%. I left my job and lived off of my savings. And then she was with me until she wanted to go back home for a bit with my dad. And she was there for a little bit, but she went into a diabetic coma and she never really came out of that. And so my mom was basically a vegetable for all intents and purposes. She didn't talk, she couldn't talk anymore, and she was on a feeding tube. And so I would go visit her every day. Every day I would go visit her, and my heart was broken because no one at 30s expect to lose, their mom, and she was my best friend. And one day I went to the hospital and I walked into the hospital room and my mom looked up at me and she said, "Hi, Valencia." And I said, "Hi, mommy." And she said, "I've missed you." And I said, "I've missed you too." And at that moment, I felt like God was told me, say everything you want to say to her right now. And I looked at her, I said, "Mom, I am the person that I am because of you. Everything you've done, I'm so thankful God gave you to me to be my mommy, and I love you so much." And I really was able to share, and I told her, "I'm going to be okay. If you're ready to go, I'm going to be okay, and I'm only going to be okay because of everything you put into me." And then we put on her favorite artist, Kathy Tricoli, and we started doing worship music, and my mom went back into that state of vegetative state. And it was a couple of months later that I walked in the room and my mom looked up at me and she said, "Let me go." And I was being stubborn and I was like, "Go where? You can't go anywhere." But I released my mom that day. She died a week later. And the thing that I learned the most about that is I guess I was always believed that God's faithfulness depended upon how he answered our prayers and how our lives worked out from day to day. But it was during that illness, as God prepared me for every stage of my mom's death, every stage. And when I say every, I mean every. I pretty much to the day knew when my mom was going to go, just based on God's leading and really paying attention to the professionals and what I observed. And I can tell you that my idea of God's faithfulness has changed forever. And for me, God is faithful not because he answers my prayers the way I pray them, not because I get everything in life my way. God is faithful because he never left me. Even when I was angry at him, he never left me. And so I changed my heart about what that means to be faithful. And I remember those moments with my mom where he gave her back to me so I could say goodbye appropriately, so I could have closure in a way that was so sweet and so special that it brings tears to my eyes right now as I think about it, because I know that everyone doesn't get that opportunity. But I'm here to tell you today, if you have a loved one that has one of these dementias and one of these diseases, don't wait until it's too late for them to understand how you love them and how much they meant to you. Use the time you have rather than fighting and being angry about the disorder to spend time letting them know all the ways that your life has been changed because they were in it. And I tell you what, when it's all said and done, those memories will be so precious.
Mm, amen. I
Yeah.
hope our listeners are paying attention to that because that is good advice. And you don't want to say I wish I said if you have that opportunity. And so
Yep.
thank you for that. And
Yeah.
I know in your story you also mentioned caring for your father as well,
Yep.
and caring for 2 parents, that's more than a notion, and in that, I'm sure you had your moments of frustration.
Yep.
Sometimes those who need the caregiving can be a little stubborn.
Mhm.
So how did you navigate those moments where there might have been resistance towards something you were trying to do for them to help them, but they said no?
So my dad had been sick for a while. He had kidney failure, and he had heart trouble, and we were going through surgeries. He had a triple bypass, and then he had to have a valve replaced. Um, And mind you, at the same time, I had my own health struggles, and I was also, my little brother who we adopted had developmental delays, and he had to have brain surgery twice. So within a 10-year period, we were all in and out of the hospital, and I was managing everybody's health care and going to school and doing my doctorate and trying to stay on top of everything. So yes, I lost it. There were times, I tell you, like I said, my dad would say, "You're so angry," and I was just angry because I felt like I didn't do enough. I didn't have enough time. I was exhausted. I was worried. I wanted my dad to see me graduate with my doctorate. I mean, there was all these competing emotions. I didn't want to lose another parent. I fought so hard. I would get angry at doctors, and the doctors have known me. My dad's doctors knew me since I was like 16, a lot of them, and so they were always very caring. And this you don't always find, but his doctors, when I would come in and I was angry because one little thing went wrong, and it was not really that big, but it would be so huge to me because it was just like another thing. And I had to remind myself, why am I angry? So when I stop myself in the middle of those feelings of rage and anger, and I want to be yelling at him, and why don't you do this? And Daddy, you're just going to do it. There were times when I would come visit him and I'm tired, but as soon as I walk in the door, he wants me to open up his jello or do whatever. And I'm like, can I just get a break? Um, and those times, like when I would say, Daddy, you need to try that for yourself. Do you want to get out of here? Like, I really had to make him understand that if I do everything for you, if everyone is doing everything for you, then when they review your case, they're going to say that you can't do any of these things. So you need to do as much as you can if you want to get out of here or if you want to do this. And then he started doing it. So sometimes it's just simply they don't understand why they need to do things. And when you put it in a way that if you don't do this, then these are the consequences. If they're still able to reason, it still allows them to feel like they're making a decision. So often with patients that have dementia, we begin to treat them like kids and tell them, you're not doing this and you better not do this. And that's never okay. They're still adults. What I suggest to families to do to decrease some of your angst and to help them feel as independent as possible is give them choices. You may either do this, or that. So you may either give me the keys to the car, you may either sell your car, or you can disable your car so that it's not drivable. What option is not in there? Driving. That's the option that they don't get to keep. And of those three, you get to pick one of those. If you're not able to choose, I will make the best decision for you, but I'd like for you to make that decision based on those choices. It's when we take choices away that you have so much more resistance. The other thing that I always tell my patients is, how would you really feel if you went out there driving and you forgot where you were going, or you got confused and you didn't see someone and you hit someone and killed them or hurt them really bad? That would make you feel pretty bad, wouldn't it? Well, I can't tell you the day that that's going to happen, but given your diagnoses, it's certainly a possibility that it can happen at any time. And this is about protecting you and protecting others. And then a lot of times they're like, okay, you know, but it's not because I've just told them outright, you can't drive.
That's good. That's very helpful because that conversation driving, I don't know what it is about the driving thing, but that's a
Man,
rough battle that if you haven't gone through
it's,
it yet, you gon' go through it. And
yeah, it's rough.
yeah, so that's very helpful advice. Now, I wanna
Yeah.
ask you, for those moments when you realized that you exploded or was mean to your dad, there might have been some really heavy guilt, shame that you felt about it. I don't wanna project, but if that was the case, what would you
Yep.
suggest to people who are struggling with that?
So if the person is still alive, going back and having the conversation, hey, the other day when this happened, I realized that I did not handle it well. And being honest, what is the rule? You have to know first, why did you react that way? Usually it's that fear, it's that longing for things to go back to what we considered normal. Um, it can be any reason, but you need to really be honest with yourself. Why did I react this way when I know that this person is going through all this? And once you know that, then you can go back and be honest and say, I reacted poorly. Part of the reason why is because I'm afraid of losing you. I love you so much. I don't want you to leave me. I'm afraid of what's down the road. And sometimes all that fear and all that pain and, and all those things are overwhelming. And I react in a way that is not necessarily the best way. And I'm so sorry. You know, um, if you can't, if you cannot talk to them because it's past and you're looking back and you're remembering, because honey, let me tell you, every time I yelled at my dad, I remember. Sometimes when I'm missing him, I remember. And what I tell myself is, you were hurt and you were scared. Things were difficult. You were doing the best that you could, and you never meant to hurt that person. In the case of dementia, they won't remember that you did it anyway. Um, but I encourage myself by the fact that I look at all the good things that I did, all the sacrifices that I made. I'm never going to be 100% perfect. And I'm entitled to have feelings that are negative. I'm entitled to have those feelings that allow me to release tension, um, even if they're not always good. As long as I'm aware that of my heart's intention, and it's not always going to be hard to forgive yourself, but honestly, you're not, unless you're beating somebody, which I don't advise. You're not, there's no damage. Yeah. Um, it's going to be the moments that love is shared and exchanged that are going to stick with that person.
That's helpful. Thank you for sharing that because someone
Yeah.
needed to hear that. And sometimes I know that people get to a place where they want to care for their loved one. They want to be their caretaker. They want to keep them in the house. And they're realizing I can't handle this anymore. I'm losing it. My health is declining as a result of me being a caretaker. And they're in this tension of what do I do if I no longer feel equipped? What do you offer them for words of advice?
So we know that we have an imperfect healthcare system, including nursing homes, etc. Uh, but you cannot be Superwoman or Superman. If you're working full time and you have a family, you cannot neglect those responsibilities uh, because you're trying to take care of this person that you love so much. Now, if you have a family system set up where people can take rotations and you can get a break and that person can stay in the home and you can get caregivers in, I'd say do that as long as you can. But don't feel guilty when a system that has caused us to be in this sandwich generation, don't feel guilty. Uh, and that's easy for me to say right now, but my dad had to be in a facility because I could not manage his care. He needed specialized care, but I can tell you I was there every day. I was there every day. I went at different times. And honey, if one thing was out of order, everybody was hearing about it. I was writing, and that takes some energy, but I don't care. I'm going to fight for my daddy. And so I was there. And when people see that that person has someone that cares about them and that is there, whether it's you have a rotating schedule where someone comes, because that allows you to free your time up to enjoy the time you come there to spend with them. I would bring him whatever he wanted to eat, even though it wasn't what he's supposed to be eating, because this is the end of his life. He gets to enjoy it and he gets to do whatever he wants. And so we would watch movies together. I would come in and, sit for hours. I would visit other patients. I would take the time that I would normally have been taken to take care of him to spend with him. So often people go into these facilities and people come for 30 minutes and then they run out because we're not comfortable with where they are. So the biggest thing I would say is get comfortable, because it's when they know, it's when the people that work there know that they have a loved one that's going to come and that you spend time and you get to see how they're being treated, that's the only way you're going to be able to advocate for them. Get comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling of being around other sick people, people that might be dying. Um, we run out of those facilities because we're not comfortable with the end of life. We're not comfortable with sickness. And I can tell you, I spent hours in hospitals by my dad's side, by my little brother's side, spent the night, got up, had my school work with me, went to work, after went home, took a shower, went to work, was back at the hospital because I need to advocate for them and because that's time that I'm not going to get back to spend with them. So if you can't take care of them yourself, you have a whole staff that's going to take care of them all the hours that you don't get to visit, but make your visits longer than 30 minutes. Yeah. Make sure you're going regularly, calling to check on them. I'm just calling, in the middle of the day, I would just call and say, I want to talk to the nurse that's taking care of my dad today. How is he doing? Has he done anything? Has anything changed? Has anything significant happened during the day? Because even if nothing had, they know, they are aware that that person has somebody that cares about them, and they keep that at the top of their mind when they're making decisions and doing things.
That's
Let somebody
right.
else's family get neglected.
Ah,
That's so mean.
that's
You're not neglecting mine. That's
You
all
say,
I
"That ain't
know.
happening on my watch." That's right, that's right.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for that. I mean, and it's true, you
Yeah.
do have to stay on top of it, you do have to be present, and so in looking at I think that is a paradigm shift in terms of what you're sharing because you're saying they can be in the facility, you're still a caregiver, but your time now is spent on different things like quality time, and you're just as invested because I think sometimes people feel like guilty and even shamed. Like you put your parent in a nursing home, you don't love them. But it's like if you don't have the ability to care for them the way they need to be cared for, that could be actually the biggest gift you could give them. And you can
Let,
still be dedicated and care for them. Hmm.
let me say this. When people say that means you don't love someone because you put them in a facility that's going to take care of them, the day that you decide that you love them so much you're going to keep them at home and you're so tired that you fall asleep and they fall down the stairs and get a hematoma is the day you need to talk to me about what it means to really care about somebody. You have to love them enough to put them in someone else's hands so they can be taken care of 24/7, not halfway. Okay. So understand that loving someone is enough to, even though you want to take care of them, it's different if you put them in there because you don't want to be bothered. And that's why I'm saying go visit. If you put them in there and now you don't have all that burden, now you should be making time to go and spend time there. You can take them out. They're not prisoners. They get signed out. So you can make plans to have them for a day or have them spend the night at the house. So but the 24 hours, 7 days a week, it can kill you if you don't have any support. I did it for my dad as much as I could until he had to go in a facility because he had physical needs. And then it was an incidental finding that he had lung cancer. They never found the primary tumor, but it was in the fluid around his lungs. So it was stage 4 when they found it. That was incidental and a shock, right? And so he was healing from having his toes amputated because he wasn't getting blood flow to his feet. Um, and he had to recover from that. So he was in that facility because of that. I would have done whatever, and my father knew that, but he did not want that for me. And so I was at the facility all the time because he wasn't in there because I didn't want to take care of them. He was in there because it wasn't possible for me to take care of them. And that's the difference, right? There is a difference in intent in my heart, right? So if it's because you cannot, because physically, financially, you cannot do it, putting them in a facility is the best thing you can do for them, but visiting them is the best thing, because one of the things research consistently shows is that individuals that are in these protected facilities, they progress faster. But I think that's because nobody visits them, or they get very few visits. They're not getting the stimulation. But if they are in a facility and they know that somebody's going to come see them all the time, then they don't have any worries. They're not worried that they're going to be forgotten and left there, and they're not lamenting that. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so that is what is important. What is your heart's intent? Don't let anybody tell you what you are or aren't, because they are not inside of you. They're not dealing with what you're dealing with. They don't know the whole truth, right? So you have to know your truth, and you have to be okay with what that truth is.
Yes, you just freed someone right now. I thank you so
I
much for
hope so.
sharing that. Yes, and
Yeah.
it's the truth. People try to get all in your business. They don't know what you're carrying right now. They don't know your heart. And so thank you for freeing some people with what you just shared. Now,
Yeah.
one other thing I wanted to ask you, and this is actually a write-in from one of our listeners, and a lot of people struggle with this, is the fact that they have several siblings, but the siblings aren't helping. And it's all on
Girl.
little old me. What do you say in situations like that?
Okay, so that was my situation. I am the fifth of five kids, the youngest. We have my little brother who's 6, but he needed support as well. And all manner of craziness happen. I don't even need to get into that, but families know that families, all kinds of things happen when people get sick, when people die, finances, and all that. You know who my focus was on? My daddy. If nobody else step up, I can't worry about them. I can't. They have to deal with however the fallout happens when that person's gone. They have to deal with themselves. If they don't want to help fighting with them, being angry, trust me, I was angry. When my dad finally died, I didn't talk to my siblings, none of them, for like a while. And slowly, God worked on me to let a couple back in. But I talked to God about it, and I was like, forgiveness and acceptance in my presence in my life are not the same thing. They're forgiven, Lord. I forgive them. But I don't want that toxic relationship. So, no, thank you. If you want to heal them and send them back, I'm all good. But God, please, please, please do not make me feel like I have to have them as part of my life. So, yeah, you're going to have those negative feelings. They're going to do all manner of stuff, but forgive them for your own sake and move on, because they have to deal with how they treated that parent. And God said, honor your mother and your father. As long as you honor your mother and your father, I promise you, as I sit here today with a doctorate as a neuropsychologist who went through school while I was going through all this stuff, had my own health care problems, had 4 major surgeries in a 6-year period while I was going through all this. Trust me when I say God honors those that honor their parents. I would not be where I am right now if I did not trust that. So trust me when I say, if you're doing it out of your heart and because you love your parents, don't worry about God is going to provide whatever you need to get through that, to get you to where you need to be at the end. Okay. My dad, I even had a sibling try to undermine the fact that I was in a doctorate program and tell my dad, she's not in a doctorate program. It doesn't take that long to get a doctorate. I'm like, how would you know? You didn't even finish high school. But that's beside the point. And so my dad, I was like, Daddy, I'm trying to do all this stuff. I'm trying to finish, I'm trying to finish my degree. And he's like, I know you say you're getting a doctorate. I was like, whoa, where'd that come from? So after that, I was getting accolades. I was getting awards at conferences, articles that were coming out. Every time I got a certificate, I would take it to my dad's hospital room and put the little certificate in a frame. And he had these things all over. And people would come in and he would tell them, my daughter's going to be a doctor. And you know what? I'm not going to fight with people about what you think, right? I was like, God will show him. God will show them. God will do it. Trust me. I honored them. That was my dad. He wasn't a perfect man at all, but he was my daddy. He's the one God saw fit to give me. So you can believe I was fighting for whatever I needed to with him. And my siblings, that's on them. That they have to respond and answer for how they treated my parents. And if they live with guilt or if they're crushed by all the things that they didn't do, And even if they're not, I could care less because I'm living my best life where I need to be. And I know I did best that I could by my parents. And that's all I care about.
That's good. That's good.
So
I
let
appreciate that
go of what
response.
other people are supposed to be doing and you do what you know you're supposed to do. God will send you the help. I promise.
Yes, yes, and I'm thinking about one of my dear girlfriends who she's on the path of being a doctor in her field, and she's also caregiving for her parents, and there's so much stress. She's a part of the sandwich generation. She has her
Yeah.
children as well, and so I wonder, how did you manage your professional goals and not have them so far on the back burner that they're just forgotten while still caring for your parents? Were you superwoman? Did you have an S on your chest? What helped you get through this?
I'm not your superwoman. That's for sure. I was singing that song the other day. I don't know why it came up in my spirit, but that's a good question. I was a non-traditional student. I went back to school in my 40s and I got all the way through my doctorate. So I graduated with my doctorate like right before I turned 51. Um, and all the young people around me are getting straight A's or whatever. I let go of my, I made more reasonable expectations on myself. B's get degrees. Okay. So one of my instructors said that one day, and I was like, you know, right, B's do get degrees. So I let go of that 4.0 that I felt like I needed to have. Uh, I did things in cycles. I didn't have a lot of social time, and that's okay because when we were on break from school, I made it up. I made sure I saw all the friends I wanted to see. I did fun things, and I pre-prepared for the next semester. So a lot of things that I did was prepare myself for what I needed down the road. I knew what my goal was, and so excuse me, with psychology, you have these externships that you're doing 20 hours a week with, and you're doing school and you're doing work. With me, I had to still work. But what I did was every paper I wrote was a paper that counted toward my ultimate dissertation. It was always about adults and aging. So no matter what class I wrote it for, I made sure there was information I was learning towards my dissertation. That made my dissertation so much easier. I put a plan in place. I would talk to my supervisors. I was very open and honest with them about, you know, the things I was struggling with my parents. And I had supportive, God put so many supportive, top of their game trainers in my life, supervisors in my life that and he just gave me so much favor with them. And I tell you what, me keeping to my plan, me understanding that me not playing with my friends and stuff is only for a season. I would go out and celebrate special occasions, but I would have a plan for that week to make sure I got whatever work I needed to get done. So no, it was not easy. Let me tell you, getting a doctorate is no joke. And I can't even really tell you today how I got through the whole thing, except to say that God was with me the whole time and gave me grace. But I also love school and I love learning. And I had a goal to make changes to change the lives of older adults in whatever community I was in. That has always been my goal. It's still my goal. And because I kept that at the forefront of my mind, it made it easier because I knew when I got to the pinnacle, once I got to the end, I would affect change in the lives of many. And that is my goal. It continues to be my goal. And keeping my eye on that goal is what allowed me to just plow through.
That's awesome, and
Yeah.
you're doing exactly what you sought out to do, helping
Yeah.
so many people in this important field. Now, I have one
Yeah.
more question for you before we close, and that is, how has support groups or counseling helped people who are caregiving and or struggling with someone who they're supporting with dementia?
Yeah, I am a big advocate for you going to counseling because you're a caregiver. I went through counseling while I was a caregiver because all the other life things they still go on. Your depression or anxiety or any of those things they still happen. So I'm an advocate for taking time out to go and connect with a therapist and get some coping adaptive coping skills in a cognitive behavioral therapy or problem solving therapy or something like that where you're learning skills to address those things that are going to come up. Groups are particularly important because in a group, you begin to learn what people who are going through this at a later stage did for certain things. So let me give you an example. Someone might have a loved one that keeps going down the stairs, but they're having balance problems, or maybe they've fallen and they keep going down the stairs. Well, while you're at a group and you talk about how do I keep them from going down the stairs, you might hear someone say, oh, what we did is we turned the door upside down and the doorknob is higher now, or they just moved the doorknob to where it's higher and that person can no longer get to the doorknob to turn it. There have been people that have made the front door and all the doors seamless with the same wallpaper so the person can't get out the door and go wandering. There have been, there are agencies in other countries where they put a bus stop outside of the assisted living place. And so the person that has decided, I'm leaving, I'm going to go get on this bus, they sit at that bus stop all day. That bus don't ever come, and then they come back in later. And so there are all these ways, but it's easier to learn about the different methods when you're in a group setting, because that's when people are going to tell you, oh, yeah, my loved one did that. This is what we used to do. And it's a place to share, not only to see others that have managed, from the beginning stages to the future stages for you, but that have practical advice that might be helpful to you. It also gives you a chance to just identify with others who are in the same place, which, so often we think like we're the only ones when we're in these situations. That allows you to feel a community, which is what we need, is a community. So yeah, those things are very helpful for those reasons.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I know that those who are listening are like, "Oh, how can I get in touch with you? You've been so helpful." So what's the best way for people to connect with you?
So yeah, I think the my email, medtherapyart at gmail.com. You can send me an email, mention this wonderful program, and say you saw me on here, and you have questions. Generally, I'm pretty open to answering as many and providing as much direction as I can. I do have a lot of resources, and I do want to be a resource in the community. And so, yes, please feel free to reach out if you're not sure. Sometimes I get questions like, how do I know that my loved one may have dementia, or I'm worried that they might have some cognitive problems. What's my next step? And I can just tell you guys that now, if you're ever concerned, don't diagnose your loved one by saying it's normal aging or it's nothing. Take them to their primary care doctor, give copious information, and ask to be referred to either a neurologist or a neuropsychologist for testing. If you go to a neurologist, they're going to send you to a neuropsychologist anyway, because it's part of the diagnosis process. If they send you to a neuropsychologist and you get tested and there are problems, the neuropsychologist will almost always say you should have a referral to a neurologist. So you should not just have one. The neuropsychologist you'll only see once a year if you see them yearly, but the neurologist is the one that will follow closely, the medical doctor that will follow you closely. So you should have both. Um, and then if you want to reach out, if you're in the Chicagoland area or the Los Angeles area, Michigan area, or the Indiana area, I can, or other areas, I can pretty much provide you with people that I know in the field that I trust. That you can be referred to. So some of us have a long waiting list, so it'll be up to you if you want to wait that long, but I'm certainly happy to help steer you in the correct direction.
Oh, amen. I thank you so much, Dr.
You're
Montgomery,
welcome.
for so many things, not just for you sharing what you did with us today, but it's important when someone's going through a difficult time that the doctor that they see has bedside manners, who they understand that people are really struggling. It's so hard. And I can tell just by this interview alone that you're so caring and it's a ministry of care for you. And so
It is.
thank you so much for blessing
You're
our
welcome.
audience today. I took away so many things for myself, and I'm sure those who listened did as well. And we might have you back on the show because it was just so good for this 1 hour. But I think we covered quite quite a bit. So thank
It
you so
was.
much.
You're so welcome. I could not be happier to have had the opportunity and the honor to speak with everyone. And anytime you want me back, I can be here for you because it's so important. It's so important. And I know that this is where God wanted me. So it's been my pleasure.
Thank you, and God bless you. And thank you all so much for being with us on the show, tuning in for this special broadcast. This was definitely one for me that blessed my soul. And so I encourage you to share it with anyone who you might know who's in the same experience where they're caregiving for someone and they're struggling with how to move forward. And so please like this episode, please subscribe. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the different outlets. And so we're just trying to get this message out to the world to help people to be encouraged and help them to heal. Also, I encourage you to check out our resources. You can check out our resources at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. You can find out how you can connect with a Christian counselor, and you can also find out how you can be a part of a trauma healing group. These resources and so much more are available to you today. So, thank you again for tuning into this broadcast. And until next time, you keep your faith on the journey. I'll see you soon.